this is Bridget, and I'm going to walk you through resume best practices. I would suggest having your current resume up on your screen to take notes as I go through the presentation. I'm going to walk you through an example of a resume section by section. For this presentation, we're going to use the Sophia Lee example resume. We are going to start with your header. Your header should include 4 things: your name, of course, phone number, email address, and address. Your name should be a font size that will pop off the page, but not so big that it is taking up valuable space. Also, you don't need to add a word mark or logo with your name. Oftentimes, added design elements like this can distract from the layout. And if you aren't going into graphic design or a creative track, it really isn't needed. You only need 1 phone number and 1 email address. You can put your full address, but it is acceptable to just put a city and state. So take a moment and look at your current header and note any corrections that you need to make. Now let's look at the sections. There are 3 must-have sections: experience, skills, and education. Optional sections are activities, honors and awards, or a combo of these. I will go into more detail about these optional sections later. Side note, please don't be tempted to use any extra sections that you may find on a resume template. We realize using a resume template is popular. If you do use a template, please use our rules for what is to be included in the design that you have selected. Also, a strong word of caution about the most popular site that we see a lot, Canva. Canva resumes do not pass applicant tracking systems. It is better to use Canva as an inspiration for a design and recreate it as best you can in a Word doc, because you can take that Word doc and convert it to a PDF. I'm going to go over how to order your sections before I get into the specifics of what goes into each section. If you have multiple roles that are relevant to what you are applying to, we recommend putting the experience section first. This makes sense, right? Because the employer is hiring you on your experience. If you are first year or aren't there yet with experience, you can list the experience section second. We also recommend only naming this header experience. For example, it wouldn't be work experience or internship experience, professional experience. We just want you to call this header experience, and I will explain the reasoning in a moment. I do want to acknowledge that there is a resume debate about education being at the bottom of a resume. Often you will get conflicting advice on this: put it at the top or put it at the bottom. Here's what I will tell you. I have never heard of an applicant not getting a position because they put their education section at the bottom. Our philosophy at the CDC will always be, if you have strong, relevant experience, which is what the employer is hiring you on, let's highlight that at the top, and the reader will find out where you went to school. The name of Newhouse will be found. Now on to what goes into the experience section. This section should be at least 50%, if not more, of the page. There are 4 elements that need to be included: title, company, location, and date. Be sure that your title allows the reader to understand what your role was at the company. Don't just write intern. What department were you an intern for? For example, account management intern, production intern, etc. Give it some context. The critical part of the experience section is what you did and how you explain it. A bullet point should always begin with an action word and not with responsibilities included. Bullets are to explain what you did, the task, how you did the task, purpose for the task, and any measurable detail, meaning how many, how often. The more detail, the better. Be sure to include programs used, especially social media platforms. Again, it is about making the algorithm work for you by being descriptive, so your document will be flagged because you are using those keywords. Be sure to separate the content with bullet points, because this makes it so much easier for the reader to skim the information. In the Sophia Lee resume, we give an example of using running bullets. This is an excellent way to save space and give you the flexibility to give the much needed detail, which, as we know, is the most important. Now we need to go over the order of what is in your experience section. An easy way to remember this is that in the communications industry, relevance always wins over chronological order. You list the most relevant information at the top. Think of it this way. If I had an internship last year at NBC Universal, but I'm currently working at Jimmy John's to make some money, and I was going strictly by chronological order on my resume, do I want to keep Jimmy John's at the top? No. NBC Universal will always go at the top because it's the most relevant to the employer. So take a moment and look at the order. Does it need to be rearranged? Are you leading with the most relevant position? This leads into explaining that any experience, whether it's paid, unpaid, volunteer, extracurricular, or coursework, is considered experience. In the example we are using with Sophia Lee, we have included an advertising course because it shows that she learned the foundational skills of being a media planner. She then goes into detail about what she did in class to show the employer the hands-on skills she learned that would translate well into the internship or job that she's applying. The key here is that you are explaining what you did in class. Do not give a list of course titles because it gives the reader no context of what you did or what you've learned. Instead, give detail because that allows you to use keywords that gives you a better chance of being flagged by the applicant tracking system. How do you know to use coursework or not? Think of it as using it as a filler or to fill a gap. If you are light in the experience section, you can use a course as a filler, such as multimedia storytelling. If you are a senior in grad and are applying to a position and realize that a particular class gave you the foundational skill set for a role, include it on the resume. That's filling a gap. The next section is the skills section. This section shouldn't take up a lot of space. It is to include computer or software programs, social media platforms, languages, please include your fluency, research tools, etc. It isn't subjective skills or what we call soft skills, such as team player or strong communication skills. These are better suited for a cover letter where you can expand on them. Take a moment and look at your skills section. Are you listing out specific programs? Education section. This section also doesn't take up a lot of room. In the Sophia Lee resume, we show an example of how to list your education if you are singly enrolled. That's the first one. Just change it to bachelor's if you're an undergrad. And if you're dually enrolled, second one. Again, adjust it to the appropriate colleges. You will see that you can include your GPA, 1 decimal point, please. It doesn't need to be 3.87654. Your minor, if you have one, and any honors that you may have. Here, if you have made the Dean's List every semester, you can note that. You can put Dean's List, then parentheses, all semesters. If you didn't make it all semesters, then you can just write Dean's List. Make sure to put your grad year and don't put expected May 2024. We know you're going to graduate. We just want the month and year, please. Also, and very important, be sure to spell the name of the school correctly. We have seen some things. So take a moment and look at your education section. Finally, the optional sections. This could be activities or honors/awards. The key here is to look at your activities listed and ask yourself if it would be better to be included in the experience section instead. For example, if I was doing social media for women in communications, then that should be included in my experience section because it is very relevant. But if I'm just a member and don't have a role in the organization, then listing it under activities is just fine. So take a moment to look at your optional sections. Does anything listed under there better suited in the experience section?
Hi, I'm Kelly, and we're going to talk about writing a cover letter. Let's talk about some cover letter best practices first. First of all, when you write a cover letter, you want to make sure that you write a new letter for each position that you apply for. You don't want to attempt to address every single part of the job description that's a fit for you. Keep it short. Job descriptions are long, but we're not going to address every single quality that they're looking for in a candidate. More on that in a minute. Next, recycle pieces, not whole letters. Use confident language and be proactive about follow-up whenever possible. Your letter will have 3 parts. There's a short introduction. This will start with an eye catcher, and it also needs to note the specific position that you're applying for. The next part will be a compelling middle paragraph. This will relate what the company is seeking to what you've already accomplished. And finally, you're going to have a preferably proactive final paragraph, really just a few sentences to wrap things up. Like I said, a lot of job descriptions are pretty long. If you look at this one, these are all the qualities that they're looking for. They give you some overview about what the role will entail, as well as responsibilities, some qualifications, and there's a lot to look at there. Sometimes, though, you'll have job descriptions or internship descriptions that don't give you very much information at all. You'll, in this situation, have to assume what they're looking for in a candidate. So we're actually going to start right there with the job description. This is where every single cover letter needs to start. Look at that job description and identify the 3 things that are both 1, something that you're skilled at and can prove that you're skilled at it, and 2, a pretty big deal. You can tell that it's important to the company and it's important to the role. If you go back to the job description, we can start to think about, okay, with my experience, what are the things that I know I can address in this role? What do I know that I bring to the table that the company says that it is looking for? In this first one, creating and managing and delivering digital content. Let's say I have that background and I'm also really good in professional working relationships and developing bonds among different teams. In the responsibilities section, increasing engagement, social media, pitching new and innovative ideas, creating graphics, editing photos. And then we'll go to the qualification section. Things that stand out here from my experience might be social media campaigns, creating editing images, video production, and then Final Cut Pro or other programs that are like that. Now that we've identified the things that we want to highlight in terms of the things that we can offer that company, we can move on. Let's summarize what those are. Adobe and Final Cut Pro know-how, experience using social media and creating engaging social media campaigns, and then successful work with different teams and different individuals. From here, we're going to start crafting that middle section. You want to briefly cite your experience to prove that you have what the company is seeking. Now, all Newhouse students are very good storytellers, but a lot of times you get hung up when you have to tell your own story. You can always start with this structure. While doing a certain job at a certain company, or as part of my coursework, or as this role for a student organization, I did these things. Briefly talking about the things that you did. Every detail is on your resume, so you don't have to give every single minute detail of the things that you did. We're going to paint with a broad brush and give kind of the generalized idea of what you did, which strengthened the quality that the company is seeking. The quality part is what we picked out from the job description. So I worked here and did this. This is the stuff that comes from your resume, which strengthened a certain quality. That quality is what we got from the job description. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a parallel between what the company wants and what you can do, and then polish it up. These parallels that you draw will become recyclable. Like I said in the beginning, you don't want to recycle a whole letter, but what you can do is recycle these parts. The next letter that you go to write, if you're drawing a parallel between what you did in a student organization for social media and what the company is looking for, and the next position that you apply for is also looking for that quality, you can recycle this piece. Reviewing those 3 main qualities that we picked out, we can now start to craft some sentences. So maybe I would write, as an editorial intern for Nylon Magazine, I pitched ideas for Instagram, wrote articles, and designed graphics. This is a good starting point. It's probably not the most exciting sentence you've ever read, but this is where we can really start to bulk things up. So another take at this might be, I was responsible for pitching ideas for creative, engaging stories and Instagram posts on a weekly basis. That's a lot better. That's giving a little bit more detail, but probably not as much detail as is on your resume. We can support this with maybe one more sentence. So if we add on to that, when pitches were given the green light, I wrote articles and designed graphics using Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator. I often collaborated with senior editorial team members to complete projects and earned 3 bylines by the conclusion of my internship. That's extra detail, but it's also helping to support some of the other ideas that we found in that job description that this person can show they have experience doing. For example, the creating engaging stories, Instagram posts, writing articles, designing graphics, and collaborating with different team members. If we zoom out here again for just a second and we look at the whole letter, you'll notice there's also a short introduction. Now that we have that middle part completed, we have an idea of what we should highlight right off the bat with this intro paragraph. This intro paragraph gives us an idea of where we'll be going in this letter, what will be covered in that middle section. So looking at that intro paragraph, there are 2 things you really want to include. The first is an eye catcher. There are 2 eye catchers that work really well. One is a reference, and a second one is an accomplishment statement. A reference is you showing that you know somebody who works at that company, you've had a conversation with them, and during that conversation, you asked if it would be all right if you mention them in your cover letter. Usually the person will say yes. So a reference to start out a cover letter might say, after speaking with Sally Smith, account director at XYZ agency, I know that I would be a great fit for this internship. If you're applying to that agency, that person works at the agency, having somebody on the inside who will vouch for you goes a really long way. The second type of eye catcher is an accomplishment statement. If you're writing a reference to start out, you also could include the accomplishment statement after the reference sentence. But an accomplishment statement is you showing, hey, I've done this type of thing before. Having done these types of things, I know that I would be a great fit for this internship or for this job. In terms of things that are not eye catchers, starting your letter with something like, my name is, I'm a student at, or I'm currently studying this major or this program. Those things aren't very exciting. They're not the most interesting thing about you, and most people will start their letters that way. Just so you know, you never need to write my name is in any email or letter that you write because your name's all over the place. So we want to make sure that we're starting with a reference statement or an accomplishment. The second thing you need to accomplish is noting the specific position that you're applying for. Your introduction might just be one sentence. If you use a reference as an eye catcher, like I said, you might also include that accomplishment statement in the intro. So let's look at the intro for this letter. Person writes, as a social media manager for the Daily Orange and a former editorial intern for Nylon Magazine, I understand the importance of creating engaging content. Polishing my social media, storytelling, and content creator skills through these experiences has made me an ideal fit for the digital content creator role at A&B Magazine. That's great. We accomplish everything we need to accomplish. There isn't a reference here, but the person gives an idea of the type of skills they will be talking about in the middle section of the letter. Also, we mentioned the specific role name, so we're in really good shape. The last thing we have to write is a conclusion. The best thing to do is to be proactive at the end and say that you're going to be in touch. Sometimes there are larger companies that it's impossible to get a hold of anybody at, or the company might flat out say, no phone calls, don't contact us. In that situation, you get kind of an out. Instead of being proactive, you can say, and I look forward to hearing from you. Using confident language throughout your letter is going to be really important. For example, when you're talking about the skills that you have or how you'll be a fit for the role, never say, I think, or I believe I would be a fit, or I think I have this skill. Always know. I know that I would be a fit. In the end, in the conclusion, if you're not able to be proactive, saying, I look forward to hearing from you, as opposed to I hope to hear from you, comes across in a much more confident way. Now, if you can be proactive, the company hasn't say don't reach out and is kind of a small to mid-sized company, you want to say something along the lines of, I would like to speak with you more about my qualifications, and I'll be in touch to see if we can set up a time to talk. You can even note that you would like to come in for an interview. That's not too forward, that's totally appropriate. Something not to do in the conclusion is to note that the person can contact you and give your contact information. We'll look at this in a second, but you should have your contact information on the page already. The person knows that they can reach out to you that way. Your conclusion might also include a wrap-up sentence if it feels right, but don't force it. Finally, this is a good place to note passion, side knowledge, anything else that might give you a slight advantage. For example, maybe you're applying to a sports reporter job and you happen to play that sport that you would be covering. That would be a good thing to note here. Additionally, if you have a passion for comedy and you're applying to a TV show that is a comedy show, anything like that where you can show that you have this additional side knowledge that could be helpful, this is a good place to put that. I wouldn't use it as a selling point in the middle of the letter, however. The reason for that is having a knowledge or being passionate or being a fan of something doesn't always make you the best candidate. But if you can sell somebody on the skills that you bring to the table, your technical knowledge, that's going to be most impactful. However, noting that you have this passion or that you have this side knowledge is just going to be icing on the cake at the end. If we take a look at the letter that we were writing, the person says, thank you for your consideration. I'm passionate about creating innovative content and would love to bring my skills to A&B Magazine. I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss my qualifications in more detail, and we'll call you this week to see if we can set up a time to talk. Perfect. Things I like here. Thank you for your consideration. It's always nice to be appreciative. Saying that you're passionate about something that's appropriate, as we just talked about, and then being proactive there. I want to discuss my qualifications and I'll call you to see if we can set up a time to talk. You need some sort of a close, writing sincerely and your first and last name, or just your first name is okay. Your whole name needs to be in your header somewhere, which we'll look at in a second, but you don't need to have anything too fancy here. Don't include your signature as like a JPEG. You can just type your name. So here's our letter again. Last couple things to look at. Having some sort of a header that ties into your resume, using the same fonts and typefaces. This really makes you look polished. It looks like you have your own stationery, and it's very easy to find the information I'm looking for. If I want to find your LinkedIn, your portfolio, your phone number, I can find all those things very easily, very readily. Lastly, we always start with the date. When you're looking at the page, after your header, you should have the date, and then the person to whom you're writing, and then your salutation. So here's the date in the future that this person is writing it. You have the person's first and last name to whom you are writing, along with their title and the company. In the past, traditional business format said that we would put a mailing address here for the company, but since we're not mailing things anymore, it's okay to shorten this and have the person's name, a title, and the company. What if you can't find somebody to write your letter to? What if there's nobody listed? What you should do is do a little poking around in LinkedIn. See if you can find somebody who's high up in that department or in HR. Worst case scenario, you can address it to the head of the company, the CEO or the president. That person probably is not going to read the letter, and nobody will be offended if you have the wrong person on there. It just shows that maybe you know somebody at the company, or at the very least, you did your homework, which is always going to reflect positively on you. So you should always address your letter to a person unless the description for that job or for that internship dictates a specific title that you should address your letter to. For example, Dear East Coast Career Program or Dear Hiring Manager. Otherwise, get a name. In terms of addressing the person, writing Dear first name, last name, and then a colon is appropriate. We want to stay away from gendering titles or making any assumptions about anybody. So writing Dear first name, last name is a safe way to make sure you always get it right. So here's our letter overall, and that's it. Congrats, you've written a cover letter. Now, because you're a smart person, what you should do is once you have that middle section written, go ahead and chop it up and label it for yourself in a separate document and say, this is my social media example, this is my storytelling example, this is my WordPress example, whatever skill it is that you're trying to show. And then next time you go to write a letter, you can do some shopping. You go to that document that you have as kind of a running thing, and you can pick up the pieces that you want to recycle. Maybe you have to write 1 or 2 new pieces, but after you write several letters, you'll be in really good shape. Good job.
Ways to get feedback. First is to make the changes. This will save you an enormous amount of time if you try and make the corrections now. We know it won't be perfect, but we will notice if you put some effort into it. Schedule an appointment with a counselor through your Handshake account or come to drop ins, which are held virtually on Wednesday from 12 to 1, or we have in person drop ins on Fridays at the CDC, which is in room 313, Newhouse 3, from 12 to 1. Please be patient. There are a lot more of you than there are of us. This means plan accordingly and ahead of time.